I can give no greater praise to the Star Trek Prodigy Season 2 writer's room than saying this. They managed to make Chakotay an interesting character and Wesley Crusher one of the coolest characters in all of Star Trek. That takes some goddamn talent. Hello, interwebs, I hope you're all doing well, and welcome to my review of the second half of Star Trek Prodigy Season 2. I know I said in an earlier video that I was going to be reviewing the season in 5-episode chunks, but two things happened. One, my first two video reviews of the season didn't do super well, and as much as I want to talk about Star Trek Prodigy, I love this season so freaking much. We'll get to it just for algorithm stuff, and then also just for my own time. It makes sense to just do it all in one chunk. And also, the second reason kind of jumps off of that is that I was actually reviewing the episodes like, oh, I watched 5, and then I'd review it, and then I'd watch 5 and then review it. I've now seen all the entire season because I was just very excited and kind of wanted to just keep going. So I've just seen all of it. So we're talking about all of it at this point. Forewarning, I am going to go into full spoilers in this review of the entirety of season 2 overall, with a focus on the last half of season 2. So just know going in that we're just full bore spoiling this thing. So if you have not seen any of Star Trek Prodigy season 2, and especially the latter half, then stop and get off here, go watch it, and come back and shout out your support for Star Trek Prodigy, because we need a season frickin' 3. Let's talk about this. So, when we left off at the first half of this season, we had our crew just go and find Chakotay stranded on this planet. And that is where I want to start this review, because these section of episodes, the first two called The Last Flight of the Protostar, two-parter, were honestly fantastic. There was this very pervasive melancholy that just went through the entirety of, especially the first episode, where we meet Chakotay now 10 years in the future. He's been marooned on this planet for 10 years, and you get this sense of weight and loss and acceptance of just, this is my lot in life from him. And it's just this pathos from Chakotay that we've really never gotten before. Setting my feelings about Robert Beltran aside, I've never hated Chakotay as much as other people have. I have despised the elements of him being an Indigenous American, because it was just, again, I'm not Indigenous American, so I let others speak on it offending them, but it just came across as very stereotypical, very offensive, and in numerous ways. And the show should have known better, and that's been said by Indigenous folks as well. So that's not me trying to speak for them, just saying what they shared. But when we had Chakotay actually being an interesting first officer, like building him up off of being a Maquis, or having his relationship to Janeway be front and center, that's when he works well. And these two episodes, and really the entire season, smartly build off of those elements to make us have a character of Chakotay that feels like he is not completely separate from who we saw in Voyager, but feels like a good evolution of that character. And I think that mostly comes out in his interactions with Dal, especially that we get in part 2 here, where Chakotay has that sit down with Dal, who is sort of trying to do new impulsive decisions and trying to help, wants to always be the leader, wants to always be involved, but just not really always thinking it through when he does the rudder the wrong way. And he has this lovely conversation about I had no direction either. And I wanted to be the leader, but I wanted to, I realized I needed to become the first officer towards Janeway, to helping someone else be the best captain they can be, to figure out what my North Star was. And that felt true to who Chakotay was. He was a rebel, he was a Maquis. We stand the Maquis here for the most part. Not all the Maquis, but generally their ideology. I'm here for the Maquis. I don't stand individual Maquis, though. That's a whole different discussion. Looking at you, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Anyways, but he was a rebel, but he did flourish under Janeway. And I think diving into that element of him and relating that to Dal worked very, very well. And I've seen some critique of the way this season ends. I'm going to be jumping around a little bit because it kind of feels like I should talk about the arcs of this season overall. I think it paired well with Doll, because Doll's character from episode 1 of this series has always been like, I'm in charge, I want to be the captain, and I kind of can do it all on my own. I take it all on my own. And while he has opened up to being willing to work as part of a team, he's still had that like impulsive, I've got to take it on, I have to be the leader mindset that feels more presumptuous rather than earned. And throughout this entire season, they've done a good job characterizing him as just someone who's like willing to work with the team, but just still like trying to get to be ahead, trying to do things fast without taking the time to settle down and learn. And I think by having him at the end of the season choosing to be first officer to Gwyn, I think is a brilliant idea. And I've seen some criticism from some people saying like, oh, no, Doll deserved to be the captain. But it's kind of the same thing that I had with Tilly in Discovery, where Discovery started off Tilly's arc with her being like, she wants to become captain. And so we all kind of wanted that. We wanted that payoff in her character. But ultimately, she took a different path because that was what's better for her as she grew, both in the writing of her character, the performance of her character, and just also what the character in the universe wanted. And it felt natural, because you don't always have the same desires your entire life. But with Doll, it's slightly different in the sense that I still think he's going to end up to be a captain, but he's got to learn to be a first officer first. He's got to learn to support others and to take orders in terms of this structure to be able to be supportive as a captain should be. And that's the same thing, by the way, that Chakotay does. So the criticism where I hear people say like, oh, well, Doll's going to be the first officer and he's never going to be the captain now. That's the arc you put him on. It's like, no, Chakotay got to be the captain despite being first officer too. So did Riker. So did many. So did Kira, as we see in Lower Deck. She's the head of Deep Space Nine. So, that's not to say he won't become captain, but this is what he needs to do. And I think that fits very well with his arc, and I think Chakotay playing that role was great. The other elements of Chakotay, like losing his first officer and not believing in him, and the first officer sort of going off and still having hope and getting killed, and Chakotay's hope reigniting when he sees them, but also the loss at that. It was just so well done. And I think built off of like the jokes of like the bird guy was just a bird guy before, and we were doing jokes at his expense, but like there added a nuance to his death. And his loss for Chakotay that was just, you felt it, and it came across so well. And then the second episode of that two-parter, where we have the Protostar being this solar ship, very much reminded me of the solar sail ships from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, one of my favorite episode Explorers, I think from season 3 or 4. One of my favorite episodes of that show, reminded me very much of that, and it brings this like nautical feel to it, but also the sense of exploration, and again, this like feeling of hope in like something new and just this nautical exploratory feel that Starfleet captures from time to time. I think is when Star Trek is at its strongest, going back to those like Horatio Hornblower-esque things from the original series. It captured that in I think a really evocative way, and just managed to just, I don't know, I think those two episodes might be some of my favorite two of the entire season, just because of this melancholy going into hope, into this, it's kind of, there's this sense of like, I don't know, magic and wonder that were just in that episode mixed with sadness, and it just, the tone of those two episodes I thought were honestly fantastic. I really, really adored them. The next two episodes that we get in the season are kind of one-offs, like just fun little adventures as we sort of do whatever stuff before we get our crew back to the Voyager. Both of them I thought were overall fine. Neither of them hit the highs of what was the one from a couple episodes ago? Is There in Beauty No Truth? The one where Zero sort of was talking about having a body and stuff like that. It didn't hit the highs of that one for me in this very Star Trek-ian sort of wonderment, cool concept ideas. This idea of there being like a Klingon on a tribal planet is kind of fun, kind of builds off of those ideas, and like again the idea of like, you know, Rock Talk getting an episode of like like feeling like she had failed, but then a new variable comes in that she didn't expect. Like again, I think those are good fun learnings. The fun of it was really cool. The Klingon guy was a lot of fun. Getting to see a Klingon scientist was a lot of fun. But ultimately it didn't knock my socks off. What I do appreciate it for, especially with like the things like the Klingon scientist, is it's doing what Star Trek Prodigy I think does really well, which is take elements of Star Trek canon and then like adding a twist on them that a lot of fans have speculated on, but we never got to see, like a Klingon scientist. We've seen some Klingon scientists before, like within that terrible two-parter back in Star Trek Enterprise, its 4th season, where Phlox deals with the forehead bridges stuff. We've gotten things like Klingon lawyers, like that fantastic lawyer in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, but we haven't really gotten a scientist like deeply explored, and I really did like seeing him here. The second episode that we get was the Cracked Mirror one, which was fun enough. I think it was a trip to the mirror universe and kind of goes the way you expect those episodes to go, which is, they get stuck in the mirror universe and, they meet their evil counterparts and they have to pretend to be them. Like, it's kind of been done before. I did enjoy some of the timey-wimey of it, like Gwen not being able to go through all the different decks because those are different universes. Kind of remind me of Shattered from Star Trek Voyager, where there was sort of like, different parts of the ship or different universes elements. I think that's kind of fun. But ultimately, we stayed mainly in the mirror universe, and that disappointed me a tiny bit because I was like, I feel like you do more with this concept than just visit the universe that we always visit and do kind of the things that we always kind of do. So it was just a little bit like, yeah, this is good, this is fine, but it didn't knock my socks off. So both of those episodes I think were good, but didn't rock my boat overall. Then we get into the last 5 episodes of the season, which, 6 episodes, I guess, technically, which really kind of all build off of each other and kind of just serialize itself all the way through, with a couple, not even detours, but different elements that get taken up in each episode, but for the most part always go through. And it's a focus on Essentia, basically trying to take over the Federation, destroy the Federation, and then them trying to get the Protostar back in time. This mainly worked for me. The one, I think, major negative on my end of this storyline, 2 major negatives. One, Essentia kind of comes across as a one-note villain to me. She certainly has less pathos than someone like the Diviner in season 1 when he was the villain had. There was a lot more depth to that version of the character, and Essentia just kind of seemed to come in season 1 to be like, oh look, I was here the whole time, and I'm the more evil version, the pure, distilled, like I have nothing to tie me to this world version of the Diviner, and she kind of plays that way here. There are attempts to add some nuance to her, like for example, we learn when they go to Solum, the past version, the younger version of Essentia, actually hates her future self and is working against her future self. So there's that, and that adds a little bit of depth, but ultimately the Essentia that we are dealing with feels a little bit mustache twirly villain. And that kind of goes a little bit into a little of my disappointment with the Solum storyline generally, because we kind of lose it for half of the season, then we come back to it at the end. And I actually really liked this concept of civil war on the planet. Like, we got the setup in season 1 of like a civil war happened, destroy the planet, and that's why the Diviner wants to go back in time to save them. And here we see the civil war actually playing out, and it comes out in the sense of like Essentia wanting to destroy the Federation and deny connection with others and other people who want to open up to the Federation. That's interesting to me, but we don't get a ton of exploration of it. And while I don't expect a kid's show to sit down and do what I love and like get into the politics, the nitty gritty of all of it, I have seen other similar shows like Amphibia or She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, or even hell, Troll Hunters even kind of does this a little bit too, the show that Hageman's made before this series, that kind of gave a little bit more depth to all sides of the fight. And here they're just sort of there. We get the Diviner and younger Essentia on one side, and like the government of Solum, which we don't really see much of, kind of wishy-washy between both sides, and then we have Essentia on the other. And Essentia is very mustache twirly. So it just not enough time with these characters to really feel like it completely earns all of this, and so it just feels a little bit fast when I'm like, you could have really dug into this and done more with this, I think, than is what's here. And so the kind of like mixing in with the time travel plot and fixing the Chakotay stuff, as well as dealing with this planet stuff with Solum, feels like it was trying a little bit to do too much, and ultimately they seem to be, I don't even want to say more interested in the Chakotay stuff, but I feel like that took up just a big chunk of the middle that it kind of left the ending feel a little bit disjointed from the top. And as a result, feeling a little bit spread out. And I think, honestly, it works even a little bit better in a binge. I've been saying I would have liked to watch this show week to week, and I still overall feel that way, but I do feel like these last 6 episodes or so benefit by it being a binge and having seen the first 5 where we got a little bit more of Solem a lot more recently. Because if I had taken, I don't know, weeks, months between those episodes, I would have really felt a little bit like, this is coming back out of nowhere, than it ultimately does here. But it still feels a little disjointed for me. However, there are a lot of things that I do like within this. I do really ultimately, I have mixed feelings. Let me start with some more mixed feelings and I'll get to more positive. Mixed feelings on the stuff with Zero. I really love the degeneration of Zero's body. It kind of felt like aging. And, there's an interesting, this feels like a very it's not exclusively a trans thing, because we all have an interesting relationship with aging, regardless of whether or not you're trans or not. But there's something to me in the fact that Zero finally gets the body that they've always wanted. And then it starts to decay. And in a way that's akin to aging. Like they have to use a cane, and there's some disability things in there as well. And, there's something that I've even felt as a trans person where, like, I came out in my early 20s and took a lot of my 20s to transition, and only recently, like in the past few years, was able to get like the last surgery I wanted, my facial harmonization surgery. And now at this point in my life, I'm not old and decrepit. I'm still in my 30s, but I feel a little bit more aches and pains than I did in my 20s. And there's an element of me like, I never got to be in the body that I wanted in my prime, and again, that's, I'm not that I'm not young, but you know what I'm trying to say? There's an element of that in there. And it's something I don't really hear talked about a bunch in a way like this that I related to. Usually it's just like trans people get the body we want and it's great and huzzah. But there's always mixed feelings about aging and things like that within there. And then I think just generally, I think everyone can relate to it on the aging level as well. So I found that to be interesting. The part of that I was a bit more mixed on was this desire for Zero to have like sensation. And so Zero at one point like sacrifices themselves, or their body I should say, in the thing that made people older, which by the way, the Andorian first officer Tysus gets aged up, and then they're just like, we can fix that, it's fine. And I'm like, wow, okay, Federation technology can just de-age people? Why were they not doing that all the time? I know there's a wibbly wobbly timey-wimey doctor explanation in there, but still it was like, okay. Anyways, Zero, sacrifices their body, and then they go back to the suit that they were using, just now with sensation in it. And there's a part of me that likes it, in the sense of, like, they get to choose the body that they want. And that is a very trans vibe for me. I'm here for that. I'm here for transhumanistic stuff. Always cool. I love that shit. But there's also a sense of like assimilationism in there, of like, Zero wants to be like what everyone else is around them, rather than fully celebrating who they are and their uniqueness. And it's an idea that sort of like, the metaphor is not entirely clear of what they're aiming at. I think the idea is they get to choose the body that they want, but it's not, but it does mix in with this sort of like, I want to be like everyone else. And this idea of like, I want to be like everyone else, I want to assimilate into your world. I don't know. I don't love that, but it also mixes with the trans stuff. So I think the metaphor is a bit mixed in my view. And as a result, I'm not, and to be clear, listeners, I know some of you will be like, oh, you're getting too lost in the metaphor, Jessie. It doesn't have to be a trans thing. I do think it was intended that way. I know Tilly Bridges, she's a fantastic trans woman, writer. She's written for a bunch of stuff. She helped, with this season of the show, and gave advice on the LGBTQ aspects. And I think she did a fantastic job overall. So I'm not like dinging her, but I think more that the trans aspect of this is intentional. And so as a result, the mixing with the assimilation bit, which I think is not even unintentional, but less like the thing that they were going for, but was sort of like part of the metaphor that they were doing, just doesn't hit as, it feels a little bit weird to me. And as a result, I'm a little bit more mixed on the intention. I think it's good intentions. It doesn't get into like problematic territory for me, like Star Trek Picard Season 3 does. Like Star Trek Picard Season 3, with its attempt to like trans and queer code the Borg stuff, gets very problematic in that season if you read too far into that metaphor. And you could definitely tell that cis dudes that worked on that show did not think about it or check with anybody on that. But here it's more just, I think because it's mixed, it doesn't hit as hard as I'd want it to, but I like it overall, I think is where I kind of end up on it. Rest of the stuff this season, Wesley Crusher kicks butt. I love all the wibbly wobbly timey-wimey stuff he does here, where he gets himself captured, and this is all part of his plan, and then Gwen like splits them up, and he's like, no, you should have all stayed together. I told you, I meant physically stay together at all times. not a metaphorical way. I thought it was very fun. It worked very well. It managed to make Wesley seem like he was very smart, and yet still keep the stakes, because one of the big problems you could have done with this storyline is like Wesley just knows that how it's all going to work out no matter what. Like, he knew that Paul Atreides, like, I know the golden path, we're going to stick to the golden path, we're going to do that, and everything will work out just fine. And here, it's like, oh, he had a golden path, it messed up, and so anything could happen. And I did like that they managed to make Wesley cool and powerful, do some wibbly wobbly timey-wimey stuff with him, but still managed to bring it back so that there still felt like there were stakes in the season. Also, Gwen getting to be a leader and get to like have to make hard choices, and she does, and sometimes she feels she screws up, but she like commits to them, and like having this questioning, and then ultimately everyone sort of being like, no, we choose you as our leader. Thal does it, everyone on her planet does it, they like accept her as part of the planet, which I think is really cool. Like, all of that I think was a really powerful storyline for Gwen, and really tied all the different threads of her characterization together very, very, very well. So loved all of that. Forgot to mention, during the Near Universe episode, we got evil whales. Even the whales are evil. I thought it was great. I did love that. Jenkem and Rock Talk, Jenkem and Murph get a little bit less to do as we round out the rest of the season, but there are stuff that, like Jenkem helping Zero, I thought was really nice. Rock Talk sort of helping out Wesley Crusher by figuring out the like time stuff was also very cool. But ultimately, the stuff that was less engaging for me, not because it was bad, just because I think there was little less like plot relevant emotional arcs to it, that I think just wasn't the intended point of it. The only other thing that we need to talk about before we get to the finale, which has a lot of stuff that I'm curious about and want to talk about and touch upon, is the stuff with Chakotay and Janeway. Now, there's already been a lot of talk online about the shipping of Chakotay and Janeway, and the Hagemans have also talked about how they were trying to walk the line of, giving credence to the shippers that have always wanted Chakotay and Janeway to be together, but not necessarily going too far in confirming it to not rock the boat too much on people who don't want to read them that way. I think they ultimately failed in that. It definitely does read to me like they're together, and I think that is the more satisfying option, frankly, and I wish they had gone, and personally I think they could have gone a little bit further and just say it. Just do it. I understand that there's this sort of like, we want to like kind of have the fans have it both ways if they want to, and headcanon it whatever way they want to. I get that, especially because if you go back and look at the history of Star Trek Voyager, there was a big debate at the time of the show of whether or not Chakotay and Janeway should be together. That came out in the show itself. Like, there was that one episode where they were on the planet with the monkey, where they literally said like, oh, we're not going to get together, and they kind of toy with the idea, and that was very much the show at the time being like, yeah, we're going to consider it, we've heard the fans talking about it, ain't going to happen. But then they would still wishy-washy do it the rest of the series. And so it's always like this will they, won't they thing that the writers seem to be disinterested in, and yet would still play into from time to time to give some pathos, and ultimately feeling frustrating to fans. And I understand the Hagemans, to a degree, wanting to respect that, both for not only the fans, but there's an element of like, you are playing with someone else's characters, and you don't want to just be like, aha, I'm gonna do this now, and kind of disrespect what came before. I get a little bit of that, like wanting to honor that, to a degree. It's kind of why, I've probably like Deep Space Nine stuff doesn't come back as much and get confirmed, because it's like, maybe people would like to do Gershie, a writer on the show, but they don't do it because it's like, oh, that didn't do it on the show, that's not my story to tell. Things like that. So I get it, But ultimately, in the day, I think it's not frustrating. I think there's enough here to feel like a satisfying resolution to Chainway and Chakotay's arcs, both individually and together. So it doesn't come across as unsatisfying in any way, shape, or form, but just more like, would have been nice. Would have been nice to have that little capstone of like, yeah, they're together, and you can imply it, and it feels satisfying. But it would have been nice just to get that like nice little button on it at the end. I think it would have. It's more. I think you would have earned. I would have earned like a warm fuzzy in my heart that they don't capitalize on, and I think they earned. That's it. They earned the warm fuzzy moment, and they didn't take it. And I just like, you know what? Do it. You earned it. You got me there. I'm here for, I want the warm fuzzies, and they just didn't nab it at the end. So it feels good, but they just didn't give me that warm fuzzy moment. I feel like. I think that's probably the best way to describe that. But this does bring us to the finale of the season. And oh boy, I really loved this. This season, so ultimately what the end of the season does, I should say, is they tie in the show into a lot of stuff that Star Trek Picard, especially in season 1 and season 3, though even a little bit in season 2 with the Wesley and Gary Seven stuff that we got back in the middle of the season. But in the finale, mainly season 1 and season 3 stuff, we get ties into that. One with Wesley Crusher meeting his half-brother Jack Crusher, who we know several years later is a prominent story element of Star Trek Picard season 3. And then also with the synth attack on Mars leading into the abandonment of the Romulans during the Romulan supernova, as well as the synth ban, and the more hawkish isolationist federation that results from that, that we saw at the beginning of Star Trek Picard season 1. And we get that here. It happens at this moment in the timeline. And a little bit of me was like, why are we doing this? This is like, what is this tying into? And it sets up, I think, a really brilliant status quo change for season 3 of Prodigy. But before we get there, the point that I want to make with all of that is what I love about this show, especially this season, is they did such a good job of interweaving all the disparate elements of Star Trek throughout all of its run. And this really feels like, this season of Prodigy really feels like the first modern Star Trek show that feels truly interconnected. We've had elements of that interconnected shared universe feeling, such as with, Strange New Worlds referencing Star Trek Discovery in a lot in season 1, like, the battle at the end of season 2 gets referenced in the season 1 premiere of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. We've had, references to Picard and synth stuff on Discovery. I'm sure there's been a couple other things here and there throughout all of this. The Zhat Vash appearing on Star Trek Discovery as well. So, like, there's been some level of interconnectedness, but it's all felt like very Easter eggy or one-off. This season of Star Trek Prodigy feels like it was the first one that really felt like it was pulling from all the different elements of Star Trek, modern Star Trek. We got references to Cerritos. We got a bunch of Star Trek Voyager stuff. Star Trek Picard stuff comes in here. That stuff from Star Trek 2009 is in here as well. Star Trek Picard Season 3. Wesley Crusher is in here. Hell, the only thing is they didn't do a lot of Deep Space Nine stuff. Come on, give me Deep Space Nine stuff. Why does no one wish to give me Deep Space Nine stuff? You bastards. Or Star Trek Enterprise stuff. It's like everyone has nostalgia for everything except for the two things that I have the most love for. It's fine. It's a personal slight against me, but it's fine. I see you all. You hate me. But jokes aside, like, it just feels like it's pulling from all these different elements, and it does so in a way that makes it feels like a shared universe, in a way that I don't think modern Star Trek has fully capitalized on as much as it could. And yet, what makes it really special is it never loses sight of the story it's telling. All these elements bolster what this story is doing. They never distract from it and never stop the story to go like, ooh, look, see the thing? See the thing that we're doing? We're pointing at the thing, and isn't that the thing that you like? Or isn't that the thing from that other show that you know? They never stop to do that, but it's always there, and it feels like it's just a part of the universe. And I really, really loved that, and I loved at the end where we do get this like very direct, like, this is what Star Trek Picard Season 1 did with the synth band and stuff. We're going to do it here down to the uniforms they're wearing, and yet it is part of setting up the status quo for season 3, which is the crew, the Prodigy main characters getting a proto-starship and getting to go off into the universe at a time where the Federation has become more isolationist. So they get to be explorers in a time where the Federation is not being explorers, and they're going to be kind of on their own as ensigns. And that works really well as a setup for season 3, because it captures the same sort of like, we're rebels outside of the system, we're a little bit spunky, we don't exactly fit within Starfleet. That has been kind of a core to the Prodigy crew, and yet because of the situation that the universe is in now, that kind of is the hope for Starfleet. These people who don't necessarily fit, these misfits, get to become the best hope for Starfleet. And that is the kind of Star Trek that I love. It's what made me love Deep Space Nine the most, because Deep Space Nine is like the misfits of Starfleet and the weirdos of even the civilizations that are from, like Quark's kind of one of the weirdos from his own civilization, and Odo as well. The misfits get to be the ones who get to be front and center and are the thing that save the Federation and save the hope, the ideals of what the Federation is. And that's what Prodigy kind of is. Lower Decks even has that too, of like these, like, you know, these lower deckers get to be and the Cerritos, as well as sort of its off to the side Starfleet ship, get to be the emblem of Starfleet. And Prodigy now seems to have set itself up to be that as well, of like, these kids are the hope for a Federation that has lost its way. And I really, really love that as a setup, and makes me really, really want to season 3 of Star Trek Prodigy. I think that is a fantastic setup for another season, and has me hopeful that they will get it. There's been talk about, like, there might be a chance to get a season 3, but only if the ratings are good on Netflix. So please, if you have not watched the season, go watch it, support it, be loud and proud about it. We need it. But I really think that a Star Trek Prodigy season 3 it's a fantastic status quo, and I think that'll be a lot of fun for the series going forward. Now, that being said, I will say, you know, I love this season, and if this is where it ends, there's that sense of like, oh, there's still more adventures out there, and, you know, there's always comics and books and different ways we could explore these characters that could pop up in another show down the line. So, like, I'm sure this won't be the end for them, even if this is the end of the series, and it does feel like at least enough to be like, all right, we wrapped up all the storylines that the show was doing, and now they're off on a new adventure, and maybe that'll happen, maybe we'll see that, maybe it won't, but at least the storyline's what we were dealing. Like, I don't feel like there's anything that I need resolved if the show doesn't get picked up for a season 3. And I think that that's a smart way to do this, because what this does is, like, it has me excited for the potential. I think that potential is really worth doing a season 3 for, and I think we should get one. But if that does not happen, everything feels at least closed off in the way that I'm like, all right, if I don't get a season 3, I'm not like, I need to know what happened there. And so I think that this is just I think it's honestly a perfect finale in that sense. It sets us up, it gets me excited for more, and yet makes me feel satisfied with what we've gotten. So yeah, I think that is a great end to the season. Like I said, I've had my nits to pick things overall, but I think this is not only a fantastic season of Star Trek, I think it is arguably the best season of modern Star Trek. I'm trying to think of, like, what would be better, like maybe season... I'm trying to remember what each season of Lower Decks is, but, like, I loved all the seasons of Lower Decks. I think they've been particularly strong. I think season 3 is probably my least favorite overall of that show, but I think I would honestly put Prodigy above any of the seasons of Lower Decks, and that's saying something, because Lower Decks is still my personal favorite of all the Star Trek shows. It just resonates, the vibe of that show just resonates with me so much, but I think that this is a stronger season than any of them. Strange New World Season 1 was really strong. Didn't love Season 2 as much. I'm trying to think. None of the Picard seasons, dear God, no. And Star Trek Discovery, you know, again, love that show, but I have my issues with it every season. So yeah, I would put this as the strongest season of modern Star Trek. And I definitely think it stands its own as one of the best seasons of Star Trek, period. You know, like Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 6 is usually what I point to as my favorite season of Star Trek. I put this up this near that. So yeah, that's my feelings on this season of Star Trek Prodigy Season 2. What did you think of it? I love all your thoughts down in the comments below. But beyond all that, my friends, live long and prosper, and don't forget to be loud and proud for a Star Trek Prodigy Season 3.